Hello and welcome to the Eurogamer Newscast, where this week we are talking all about the PS5 Pro, which was announced this week and comes with a pretty audacious price tag. Joining me to talk all things PS5 Pro, we have Victoria Kennedy from the news team.
Hello.
Digital Foundry's Tom Morgan.
Hello.
Managing Editor Catherine Castle.
Hello.
And me, Ed Nightingale. So, PS5 Pro, it was announced this week as part of a technical showcase, I think they called it, from Mark Cerny. That's his name, isn't it? Mark Cerny. Which comes with a lot of improvements over the base PlayStation 5, but also a massive price tag of £700. This console is also digital only, so it's an extra £100 for the disc drive. And because this is based on the PS5 Slim model, you need an extra stand to place it vertically, which is an extra £25. So that is £825 for the complete experience, which is a lot of money. There are various improvements, of course, that come with it. But yeah, it's interesting to think who this is really for, which is a point that I want to get to in a bit. But first up, what were your thoughts on this showcase overall? Were you impressed by what you saw? And I'll throw that out to anyone.
No. I was slightly disappointed with the showcase. I don't think 9 minutes was enough to do the product justice if we're going from a purely product focus here, and we'll discuss the price later. I don't think that they showed enough in that quite tight time frame to really let people see why they might want to upgrade to a Pro or buy first time for a Pro. They obviously had the comparison side by side of like, this is The Last of Us Part 2 remastered on a PS5, this is it on a Pro. And those clips just felt too, they were too rushed for me to really feel that I was experiencing what that difference was.
Yeah.
I was quite underwhelmed by it as well. Just because the price is a big thing to get over, but also, the actual games that they showed off, I thought weren't great examples of kind of what the Pro could really do. Yes, there were some nice frame rate boosts, but as Victoria was saying, like, they didn't really show us the games long enough to really appreciate like what that might actually mean. And they were also just quite old games. I mean, The Last of Us Part 2 is great. It looks great. And it's a very, the PS5 remaster is a very flashy version of that game. But it is also still a PS4 game at its heart. And I would want to see something either completely new or a game that didn't have any enhancements already to kind of really here's what it looks like on a base PS4 or even just a base PS5. And this is what the Pro, here are all the magical bells and whistles that can bring. That's what I wanted to see, and I didn't see that.
What we needed was Bloodborne then.
Yes.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, sure.
We got Bloodborne.
I think that's the thing. It's a new console, but it's also not. It's an upgrade. So they're not releasing this with a brand new game to show it off. It's more about how can this improve the games you already have. But those games are PS4 games. So of course there's a big difference from that, but maybe not from the straight from the 5. Tom,
True.
What were your initial thoughts?
I have to admit I was disappointed with the general presentation of what it was like a proposition to the gaming industry, right? How do you what is the value proposition being made for a mid-gen refresh? Is it worth your time? Is it worth upgrading over what you've got? Where does I think they started it off well because they're clearly outlining the fact that the base PS5 is a good experience. Like you've got something. We're building on something that's really strong, a strong foundation. But then the second half of the short 9 minutes that they had to present it were kind of made up of comparisons which didn't really come together for me. It was, I don't know if it was just me, but I couldn't really see much of a difference besides there was a 30 versus 60 FPS difference in some of them, which was, a sort of self-evident in a lot of ways. There was the Gran Turismo 7 ray tracing upgrade where you can now see the bodies of cars reflected in other cars, which, they showed briefly. but I think they've got a challenge really because the upgrades that they're talking about don't always translate to comparisons like that. You need to really dial in and hone in on the differences. Like, for ray tracing, you're talking about very small improvements. And also, like Gran Turismo 7, they've mentioned that they had a 8K mode in the CNET article that came out a bit later. And it was just like, okay, well, how do you get that across in a presentation that's 9 minutes long? And they're kind of hurriedly going through all the comparisons. So, and it's not even like they started with the price tag. They ended with the price tag with a brief 5-second flash for all territories, just saying £700, €800, as if like they're almost sort of bashfully ashamed of it. Just like, oh, quick, and now we'll run away.
Yeah.
Mark certainly didn't say that himself. That wasn't in his script, so he didn't have to admit to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
There were sort of 3 key new features that they were sort of really pushing, which I guess we should just talk through and maybe explain what they are. And for that, Tom, I'm going to come to you because I'm interested in what these really mean in layman's terms.
Not me, Ed. I mean...
sorry. So we have an upgraded GPU, we have advanced ray tracing, and AI-driven upscaling. What are they all about?
It's a 3-pronged approach, which makes sense. The hardware boost is kind of the one you most expected going in. It's a sort of a mirroring of what they did with PS4 and PS4 Pro. You take the same CPU architecture and then you improve the GPU side. Back in the PS4 Pro days, that was to support 4K gaming, where most games kind of rendered at 1080p. They found a way to cleverly, they threw more horsepower at the problem on the one hand to push more pixels to fill a 4K display. Makes sense. But then, so what we've got there, I believe, I'm just looking at Victoria's article. It is 67% boost for the GPU. Memory is 28% faster. That goes a long way towards filling out the pixels in the display. Where, to be honest, in the last 4 years since PS5 released, it hasn't been clear sailing for 4K gaming. You've had a lot of games which run to support ray tracing features, for example. We've had to take a drop to 1080p, 720p even sometimes, which has been frustrating for a lot of people. Running on 4K displays, you have a 720p to 1080p range in a lot of these games, which are then AI upscaled using FSR2 and technologies like this, but the results don't look very good. And people are, a lot of people are playing these games like Lords of the Fallen, and a couple of others. Star Wars Outlaws is another one that does kind of like this sort of thing, where they bake in ray tracing into the world, and it's part of the art design. There's no way to like swap over to another performance mode without the ray tracing because it's part and parcel. So you're kind of stuck with the crutch, the compromise to run at lower resolutions. So the PS5 Pro is throwing the GPU hardware horsepower to improve that. So that's part one. Part two is the ray tracing, handling of ray tracing performance is doubled. Not entirely clear how that's going to work, but that kind of goes with the GPU increase as well. And the third part is that PSSR is the AI upscaling technology that's kind of equivalent to DLSS on NVIDIA cards. It will be a kind of a hardware-based approach built into the PS5, so it won't take any extra power from the PS5 while it's running games. And having a dedicated bit of hardware to do that will kind of smooth things over. So yeah, that's kind of how it all combines, and it's smart. It'll definitely get you a lot closer to where we wanted to be with PS5 in a lot of games, and address a lot of complaints we've had with certain games.
Yeah. So I guess the big question then for everyone is, could we tell the difference?
So I couldn't, but I'm also very aware that I feel like I'm missing something here in some kind of anonymous group. whenever I start up a game, I just crack on with whatever the first option is. I don't actually choose between performance or fidelity. So I'm not someone personally who notices frame rates or anything like that. For me, when I play a game, I played The Last of Us Part 2 on PlayStation 4. I love that game. I played it again when it was remastered. I still love that game. And I love that story, but for me, the benefit of the remastered edition was like the lost levels and the extra bits that came with it, not because it's something I thought looked better, because to be honest, I couldn't really tell a difference.
Yeah.
And with that game, I never played that game and be like, I love this story, I think you made really wonderful, compelling characters, but I wish the shrubbery in the background was more realistic. That's just not something for me that has ever actually crossed my mind. And when I was looking at the comparison videos, again, we were watching it on YouTube, so
Yes.
it wasn't like a side-by-side comparison of the consoles in front of me, as in like real time sort of thing. But I couldn't see a difference that made me think, oh yeah, the Pro definitely has the edge here.
Yeah.
Catherine, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like I can usually tell the difference with like frame rate and things, and there is like, I'm not gonna lie, a tiny part of me that's like, oh, I would actually quite like to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth at 60 frames per second.
Yes.
And it, not be a kind of slightly juddery mess. But also, I have like, by the time that I want or will want to replay that game, it'll probably be like another 5 years' time. At which point, maybe the PS5 or the PlayStation 6 will be out. And will that be backwards compatible and I'll play it on there? I don't know. But like, I'm in no rush to like replay it right now. Because I have just spent, upwards of a stupid number of hours playing it already.
Let's not talk about the hours.
and it was fine. And, it will probably come to PC, and I'll probably just play it on PC, because I have a decent PC at the moment, and, I don't want to spend another 700 quid on a console just to do that. So, like, the frame rate boosts are always, like, I would say always welcome, and I think, you've seen just how nice that can be on, on Xbox with their, with their backwards compatible things, or their instant, the frame rate boost there. Like, that is a tangible thing that, like, yes, does make games nicer. Obviously with Xbox, it was just built into the console and you got it for free, and you didn't really have to buy another whole console, spend 800 and however many pounds to get that. But yeah, in terms of like the actual graphical boost, these are such like, even as someone who's spent several years playing PC games and also looking at hardware and testing graphics cards and stuff in a former life, I am like come on, like these are such minor upgrades that like most people will not really, will not see the benefit, will not suddenly appreciate their games anew with like, oh, all this mind-boggling detail. And I think that it's yeah, but there it's less convincing. Frame rate boost, great. But yeah, in terms of like extra shiny or extra sharp background players in a Ratchet and Clank parade scene, I'm less fussed about.
Yeah,
at least that was a PS5 exclusive. So
yes.
at least that's
It's true. One very interesting bit that came out of the Cerny presentation was that he mentioned he's got telemetry data on all the people that have used the performance modes, and he said 3/4 of players prefer the performance mode, which I think is quite telling. I think that's very true of how I play, certainly.
I also am very much a performance mode person. I think this new round of consoles had made me appreciate frame rate more than I did before, and now that I've got used to 60 FPS, I find it quite hard to go back to 30. So I will always play things in performance because I'm just not bothered about extra pixels. And when he's zooming in on, look at the background of these tiny people at the edges of Ratchet and Clank, and don't they look sharper? I'm like, do they? And admittedly, that is a YouTube compression thing, I'm sure of. It's hard to tell on a YouTube video, but equally that means you're only going to tell if you've got an incredibly expensive flashy TV, which is then a whole other thing to buy on top of this expensive console to actually make use of it and see a difference. I wonder as well, with all this extra horsepower, they're talking about improving frame rates. What is to make developers use it for frame rate and not say, well, we're going to use the power for other flashy things and keep it at 30?
That's the thing. They can take it in so many directions. They can They can push it to 8K resolution if they want, like we heard through the CNET article about Gran Turismo 7. Push for ray tracing features. But I think they have heard quite loud and clear that people do want more performance modes, and certainly pretty neatly summarized the appeal of a PS5 Pro by saying you've got the two modes by default on a PS5, right? And you want to have a combination of both. So I think, fidelity and the performance mode, you want the fidelity modes, graphics, but with the performance modes, performance. So the Pro is kind of going to do that for you. I think that's a pretty good line of argument for why you might want it. And I'm going to echo what you guys said about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because frankly, that's the situation I've been in. I'm playing it, like I'm halfway through the game, 40 hours in, and I love it so far. But it took me a good while before I realized I'm not sure which mode to use. I really want to have the performance mode, but it does look blurry. There's no getting around it. Then I ended up on the higher resolution fidelity quality mode, and that's how I've played. And it's a bit of a psychological trick, a bit of a tangent, but once you start on one, if you boot your game on one, if you boot your game on the 30 FPS mode and don't switch to the 60, your brain kind of adjusts to it. But once you go to 60, it's hard to go back. So
yeah, definitely. There is another element to this, which they talk about in the PlayStation blog, which is PS5 Pro Game Boost, where they say it can apply to more than 8,500 backward compatible PS4 games playable on the PS5 Pro. This feature may stabilize or improve the performance of supported PS4 and PS5 games. May stabilize, not doesn't, may stabilize. Does this mean, the big elephant here, we mentioned it earlier, is Bloodborne. Does this mean that we can play Bloodborne with 60 FPS? Is that what we're talking here? Is that what we want?
Yeah.
Shall I go for this one, or
whoever?
I would play Bloodborne as much as I can. That's my thought on that.
Are you done?
I'm done. Tom, you can be as technical as you want now.
Okay. The problem with Bloodborne is it's baked at 30 frames per second. It's capped at 30, and with an unevenly frame paced 30 as well. Until they software update it specifically, they are not going to get any more frames out of that game. The thing about the boost mode is it's an impartial sort of system level toggle. If it works like the PS4 Pro's boost mode to base PS4 games, the game itself won't be aware of better hardware per se. It's just that, again, using the example of the PS4 Pro had more hardware to use, but it sort of limited its clocks, GPU and CPU side, to stay compatible with a huge range of PS4 games. And then as an option, users can toggle on this boost mode to unlock the PS5's hardware, but it will only say if a game was already dropping under 60 or dropping under 30, it'll always only get it up to the target that it was originally meant to get to. So Bloodborne is actually a stable 30. Annoyingly, the frame pacing is wobbly and all over the place, but it's at 30 FPS all the time. So it won't fix that without intervention from software or Sony. So that one's kind of going to need some manual tweaking. But I will say Elden Ring, which is like a frame rate, roller coaster on PS5, that stands a chance of being fixed. That's a genuinely exciting prospect. It will have a chance of getting to 60. Till now it's been about 45 FPS, no matter which mode you use, really. So that one will be a lot better.
So yeah, they said that there needs to be a specific upgrade for PS5 Pro in order to get extra benefits from it. And there's 40 to 50 games at launch, but they sort of announced, was it about 14 or 15, I think in the presentation or shortly after?
If you want to be specific, but yeah, not a handful.
Yeah, so this is for specific games, but presumably more and more will jump on that bandwagon over time.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the big question then is with this price tag and this supposed, until we see it properly, improvement in graphics, who is this for? Who do we think is actually going to buy this?
So I was actually reading a few comments and things yesterday, and so many people were talking about, like, you could get and Catherine, you said similarly, like, you have good PCs and you can build a PC and you can probably get some of things. But then there's obviously a lot of PlayStation games that are not on PC. And so for those people who do appreciate this performance fidelity stuff, which clearly I don't know much about, I can understand why Sony is catering to that market. I just think it's a very small market and one that I am personally not part of. But I can understand those, Tom, like you have said, people have made comments about the PS5's frame rates, performance, etc. since its launch. And so this is the next evolution. And for some people, that is an important evolution to have. But it's just not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like catering to the people who bought the PlayStation 5 at launch, and the kind of dyed in the wool PlayStation people who will want the best version of whatever of their favorite games, kind of no matter the cost. I think that is the audience that it's sort of it's probably a good way of thinking about it. Is it's the same type of people who buy the flagship graphics card every year, even when they don't really need to. It's just because it's, and the people who upgrade their phone every year just because it's the latest model and it's the best, and it's I think like it's for the people who the cost doesn't really make any difference. They just want the best thing no matter what. And I think that even
actually. Oh, I mentioned the price to my husband yesterday. He said, "But yeah, you see people spending like thousands of pounds on an iPhone." And I was like, actually, that's a good point. I hadn't considered that because it's just not how I think.
And think about how long you play your PlayStation 5. For some people, that's a considerable amount of time. Maybe not as much as a phone, but still enough time that you're going to see some value out of that.
Yeah. I think also, like, even though it is expensive, it probably, like, if you do compare it to kind of like a PC, an £800 PC is not going to get you 4K gaming at what they are supposedly offering. That's kind of like an entry level price for a PC that's probably will probably do decent 1080p at 60 frames. Probably my I'm sort of slightly out of the game on Tom would probably be able to speak better to what an £800 PC
that sounds right to me. Yeah, I wish it was still good. £800 used to be the level I bought a PC at, but nowadays, yeah, you're right, it's not going to cut it for 4K.
Yeah, and I think that like also a console still is it is a simpler, easier proposition than also than a PC. PCs you still got to contend with like Windows updates, driver updates. I mean, the PlayStation obviously still has its own share of updates, but it is usually just press a button and it does it. PCs are still like, even though they do offer comparatively more power, or can do that, they are much less consumer friendly as objects of technology. And so, like, for people who do want that kind of experience without spending upwards of probably $2,000 on a PC, and can just plug it in under their TV. It is even though it is still ludicrously expensive for a home console, but I think that like it's for those people who it's that sort of cross section of kind of people who for money is no object, but also the people who just want the easiest path to like the best thing.
I think that's quite a small cross section, though. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the stats with the PS4 Pro were sort of, or Pro versus normal was like 80-20. So I think it feels like this is very much for people to upgrade. It's not for new people coming in thinking, right, well, I want to just jump to the best one. Because if they're late, they're maybe not the hardcore fans. And I think you're right that it is trying to compete with the PC market, but purely looking at sort of consoles are notoriously meant to be accessible and approachable for people, and this, by comparison to other consoles, does not feel approachable in the slightest. And I think that's why there's such a shock at the high price for this.
I think also that there might have been a change in scenery with how people approach PC gaming these days compared to the PS4 Pro era, where Sony's publishing a lot of its own stuff to PC now. Which wasn't the case back then, and I think you could make an argument that you could put that money towards a better GPU for your PC to play Final Fantasy VII, God of War, all of these games which are now like Horizon, and eventually Rebirth when that arrives. I think the exclusivity, or the timed exclusivity to PlayStation 5 is the appeal of owning a console at this point. And if you want to have the best visuals and have it earlier, then that's the way to go. But the value proposition is definitely changed.
It does also make the base model PS5 look a bit better by comparison of like, well, you could spend 700 on this or have a nice one for 500 that is still perfectly fine. So maybe we'll, see a bit of a comparison there. So imagine that you are either Nintendo or Microsoft. What are you thinking right now, looking at this and seeing the reaction from people of the price tag? Do you make changes? Where do we think Switch 2 is going to land?
Oh, see, I've seen so many people comparing about, for buying a PS5 Pro, you could get 4 Nintendo Switch Lites or something. And and I'm like, okay, well, that is a good point, but obviously the Pro is offering so much more. If I was Nintendo or Xbox, I still don't think the Switch 2, or whatever it will eventually be called, is going to launch anywhere. It's going to be several hundreds cheaper from my inexperienced prediction. I don't think that Nintendo would ever want to launch a console at that kind of price bracket. And even to the point, like, I know that whenever we talk about like the console wars, we're generally talking about Xbox versus PlayStation. But I still don't see Xbox even reaching to that level.
It feels like Xbox's whole thing is trying to be approachable and trying to make their games as widely accessible as possible, which is why they've got the S, which has, I guess, somewhat shot them in the foot a little bit. But
they've also
they
released a
look
Fire
a hell of a
Stick.
lot cheaper by comparison now.
You don't even need an Xbox console anymore. You can get a Fire Stick and an Amazon TV and play Xbox games with Game Pass. They are making, not consoles obviously by any means, but they are definitely going, like you said, to be a wider, more approachable brand.
It does feel like Xbox is increasingly becoming more of an infrastructure for games to be released across any platform that might come across, might be popular at that time. So it almost feels like Microsoft are veering away from the model that Sony and Nintendo are using to sell their consoles and the format that we've known for so many decades in the console space, of buying the console first and then the games come with that. So Microsoft, I think, are in a sort of transitional period. They're going for a different direction, I think. Nintendo, though, are definitely in that traditional format. And I totally agree. The price point, they have been, was it $279 for a Switch on launch back in the day? So, I mean, I think people were quite surprised at how expensive that was, because Nintendo tend to not go for the cutting edge in sort of hardware, and maybe go for something that's been proven and tested for several years, existing technology that sells cheaper, but they developers are more familiar with it and they can get some great games out of it. So I'm not expecting a powerhouse machine out of Nintendo, and definitely not on the level of what Sony are doing with PS5. Maybe I think it will undercut the base PS5. That much I'm very sure, but they're not going to go for anything higher.
Mm-hmm. It does feel like this is. Sorry, it does feel like this is sort of separating the three companies a little bit. You've got Xbox that's creating that infrastructure. You've got Nintendo that is trying to go for the approachable, family-friendly price point with good games, even if the graphics aren't cutting edge. And then you've got Sony, who are really aiming for that elite, sort of Apple equivalent of buy into our products and we'll give you the best quality of everything, but it's going to cost you a hell of a lot to get that.
Yeah. And I don't know if, PSVR 2 has made me worry about their assessment of the market. It does seem like that's just gone, even in the presentation for PS5 Pro, that's almost invisible.
It felt like a footnote, if that. I think they mentioned the PSVR 2 along with compatible accessories. It was just kind of mentioned in a list of other things like the DualSense.
Yeah,
no improvemments. I'm sure there will be improvements, but no mention of that.
Yeah.
Catherine, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of. I think that like Xbox almost seem to be going in the opposite direction. And, as Tom was saying, like their whole thing right now seems to be making their games playable on as many platforms as possible, not even on an Xbox console. Like they are very much pushing toward that kind of, play anywhere. You don't need like crazy expensive, powerful hardware to play their games. Like they're just there, available for you to play on whatever thing you happen to own. And I think like Nintendo have just always been in their own doing their own thing, like not even in the competition, not to any kind of disadvantage. Like they are doing their own thing and setting their own path. And I think like it would be an open goal for Nintendo to, like, you know, whenever they decide to talk about Switch 2 or whatever their next console is going to be. Yeah, like Tom, I think it won't be more than, like, I would probably guess that it would be 350 absolute max. Like, it's not going any higher than that
for sure.
And you know, like, it would, that would just be its own thing. Like, it's not even gonna compete, and that's as it should be. Personally. But yeah, I mean, I think that there still is, like, for Xbox, there probably is, again, like, another open goal here for, like, just announcing a slightly. I mean, you know, they have already done their sort of mid-generation refreshes, and they're not pro models per se, but they have announced those, you know, those other Xboxes that are coming
the digital only X
in, you know, around Christmas time. There probably is, like, if I were them, you know, maybe there is a very easy, you know, extra upgrade that they could, you know, either pull out the bag or, again, just do something for free that isn't, you know, it be the turning the tables on the here's how you share your games moment.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I think that there probably would be something very easy for them to do, to just, like, say, hey, this is why Xbox is better. Or, you know, this is friendlier to people. But yeah,
this was just a reported statement that was shared by people who were apparently there. But I remember ahead of, I think it was Power World's release, and Sarah Bond had made a comment about every screen is an Xbox, and again, they are going for that much wider spread of where their games can be accessed from. Which, I mean, whether or not that will pay off for them is a different story, but it's, definitely, like we said, a different approach to what Sony is doing with PlayStation.
Even if they bundled in a game, because this PS5 Pro doesn't come with any games, you've then got 70 quid a game on top of that. So adding to the cost even more. Even if Xbox kept it the same and said, hey, we'll give you a game, equally, maybe a trial of Game Pass is more likely, because then that gives you access to even more games. But and I don't know if they do that at present, actually, when you buy a console. Did
Sony say anything about PlayStation Plus? Because they are doing Asterisk Playroom pre-installed like they did with the base model, original model.
And it's a 2 terabyte hard drive as well, I'll just quickly throw in.
Did they say anything about having any subscription benefits to PS Plus?
No mention of that.
No.
Anyway, no.
Again, chuck in a 3-month trial of that. That's at least one extra little benefit that's pretty easy.
Yeah, for given it is called the Pro, it doesn't feel very premium in a weird way. You know, I mean, maybe we'll touch on this a bit more in a sec, but no disk drive, no stand. I maybe even expected the DualSense Edge to come with it, you know, better controller, or the 2 terabyte SSD makes a lot of sense given there's no disk drive. But yeah, it does feel like they are cutting a lot of corners in terms of, you know, not adding to the cost, but it's still very expensive. So it's kind of a bit of a shock.
When we had the leaked, because there was obviously, like, we knew the PS5 Pro was coming even before the official announcement. When we sort of had seen the specs of what this then rumoured console was, from your professional points of view, where would you have priced it from what you had seen?
That's a good question. I mean, sort of, I was looking back to see how much the PS4 Pro cost at launch, and I was amazed that it was also £350, exactly the same price as the base PS4 cost when that launched. And so, like, that in itself, even though the PS4, my memory of the exact benefits it offered at the time are quite hazy, I'm going to admit, but, like, even if it was similarly marginal boosts, that is a much easier sell to an existing user to upgrade. I mean, I think, like, we did the same. Like, we thought, hey, that's a shinier console that can do proper 4K. I think we actually bought our 4K TV at the same time as we got the PS4 Pro. But and it came with a game. I think we got the God of War Ragnarok bundle with it or something. It was a God of War game, whichever one it was at the time.
I think it was the first one.
Yeah, maybe the first one, actually. Yeah, that would make more sense time-wise. But yeah, like, just that as a proposition is such an easier sell. And I mean, I definitely wouldn't have put it at £700. Like, maybe, I don't know. I mean, even 600 would be a lot.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I would have pinned it at 600 maybe, tops, and that would have been. I did have a hunch that they would exclude the disk drive, because I thought, well, they've got this setup in place. It's clear that they've got how they're treating the slim model and the attachable optional disk drive. They can use that to their advantage and cut costs with the Pro model. Okay, fair enough. Maybe it'll be 600, but 700, and then you're looking at 825 for the full package if you want to have it stood up, like I have it stood up back there. You can probably see. Yeah, there's not really. It makes it a very hard sell because I bought all physical where I can anyway. So Elden Ring, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm not rebuying all those games. They're expensive. So, I'd sooner buy the optional drive. So Sony have definitely put. I'd say I'm maybe one of the more discerning players in terms of visuals and what I want from the performance of a console, and even I'm like gritting my teeth a little bit at the price of it. So
yeah, I guess what they really want is existing, as we've sort of seemed to have discussed, is wanting existing players to upgrade. And I guess if it's only a slight increase in price from the existing model, it's like, well, maybe I sell my current one and put that money towards another one, which then makes it a little less money. But jumping up to 700 or even 825 is a big jump. Even if you sell your current model, if you get maybe 300 quid for it or something, that's still a lot of money to have to put down for the new one. So it is a lot. It is a lot. We should probably finish up at this point, but I will end with the question for all of you, which is the obvious one. Will you buy a PS5 Pro?
Probably not.
I will wait till the PS6.
Not in this economy.
But it's a no from me as well. So that is a unanimous no on the PS5 Pro.
Yeah.
There we are. Well, thank you all for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening. Catherine, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X at Burninator, which is a very awkward spelling to have to say. I should probably change it at some point. But it's BYRNE Inator, based on my old surname, which I should really change. So yeah, that's a very convoluted way. But yeah, you can find me there.
You should be
And
at
Victoria?
Queen of the Castle. Oh, I am at Little Chop Shop Gal.
And Tom?
I'm at Cataferal, which is again much very tricky to spell out, but yeah. Just type it in. You'll probably see it on my author bio.
Nice. And you can find me at ed_knights. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see and hear you next time. Bye.
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 Bye.